Rachel said, we worked at Lubrizol. Lubrizol makes base chemicals for soaps, shampoos, and car fluids. So they ship the base chemicals off to places like Body Works and Dove's, and then they finish up the soap or lotion from there. We worked on Fridays from 1 until 4, from October 14th through November 18th. We did have a Tuesday in there also to get our project done before Thanksgiving break. We looked at shipping costs for products and tried to determine why they were inconsistent throughout the department, and we reported to Joe Lovell, who was a chemical engineer, and we worked in the laboratory department.
So when we got to Lubrizol, we were given access to SAP, which is their database, and we were looking at two companies specifically. I worked with information from Hardy Diagnostics, and Chelsea worked with BWR International, which is just two companies that ship products to Lubrizol. So once we got into SAP, we were overwhelmed with the amount of data. There were years and years of data in there. And so to narrow our focus, we looked at several categories. So we looked at the fiscal year, which is 2016, the freight cost, the order cost, the individual products, the shipping date, and the delivery date. And then these products ranged anywhere from less than $5 to over $1,000. So we kind of needed like a common denominator to compare these. So we decided on a percentage of freight cost. So to do this, we took the order cost plus the freight, which is how it was given to us in the system, and subtracted the freight cost to get just the cost of the product. And then we took the freight cost divided by the product cost and then multiplied it by 100 to get the percent freight cost. So then we classified each order by the percentage. So we had a category of 0 to 19.9, 20 to 39.9, and so on. And then we decided any orders that had more than 20% shipping were considered high freight costs, and we were going to investigate those further. And to investigate them further, we looked at the individual products. So this is just a snapshot of the data, and it really is just a small portion because each row probably went about 20 cells out, and we worked with anywhere from 100 to 150 products each. So we solved for the percent freight cost, and then we color coded based on our categories. So this is just kind of like a sneak peek into the chaos.
So this is an example of one of the products we flagged. This is a filter that they ordered from BWR. And as you can see, the percent freight cost is over 100% or very close to 100%. This means that the freight cost costs as much as the product or even more. So this was very alarming for Lubrizol because they're losing money just by shipping the product to them. And one trend that we found was that it was drop shipped from the supplier, which means it was ordered through BWR, but it was shipped from somewhere else. So that could lead to a higher shipping cost. And then also, if we look, sometimes it's ordered twice a month, so the period is the month. So in September, it was ordered twice. However, these two products were ordered at the same time, but shipped separately. So instead of shipping a quantity of two together, they just shipped them both individually, which could cost a higher freight. So they're basically charging Lubrizol more than they need to. This is a graph that represents the filter. The light orange is the freight cost, while the dark orange is the order cost. As you can see, they're just about half and half, which represents that the freight cost being equal to the product cost. So this is really important, I think, to see, just because a lot of people are looking at 115%. Sometimes I think it's the product cost times 115%, which would be way more than what the freight cost actually was. So this just shows that it was equal amounts.
Okay, so we're going to hand out our activity. Chelsea's going to pass out a piece of paper, and all we want you to do is fill in the blanks. So this is kind of what we were doing the first couple weeks that we were there. We were just finding the percent freight cost and filling in missing information. And then once you find the percent, go ahead and mark or highlight or something any that are considered high freight cost or more than 20%.
You're good.
When you say?
Yeah, so you guys think that's behind. From that
Lane?
Yeah.
Natalie's got this stuff.
No, it's fine.
Oh, you're doing different ones.
Yeah.
Never mind. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, so for that, correct? No, so it'd be, yeah, if you add these two together, you get that.
Okay.
Oh, the bottom.
We do what we can.
I was trying to check with you. And I got confused.
Oh, wait, okay.
Okay, just about one more minute or so.
For real.
So you have that by the sequence of the break house, and then you can add that to that number.
That's what I did.
I guess we'll see in a second.
Alright, it's okay if you're not done. We are going to show you the answers. So you should have flagged the second, fourth, fifth, and sixth product. So this is real data that we had. A product actually did have 300% shipping costs. This is a really good activity to bring into your classrooms, maybe for like 7th or 8th graders. It's a good introduction to percentages and just solving for different values. So it's a really good way to bring real world things into the classroom because obviously like 300%, that's kind of problematic, and that's something that they can analyze the results for.
So what I learned from this experience is communication skills. Joe was constantly working while we were there, and since he was a chemical engineer, he was out in the plant, and so we couldn't really go and get him because we weren't allowed to go to the plant by ourselves. So we had to like make sure we asked our questions right when he was passing or like in his office, just so we could get all of our questions asked. And also the communication between Rachel and I. We were in the same room and we worked at the same time. However, we were so focused on getting our data organized that when we compared our data at the end, they were organized completely different. So we kind of had to go back. So just making sure that you're constantly working together and communicating is really important in a team. Also organization, like Rachel said, we had hundreds of cells of data. And just making sure that you can interpret it fast and that the company can also interpret it because they are getting our Excel sheets. So we had to make sure we organize it in a certain way so it made sense to everyone. And also Excel skills, we worked on Excel the entire time. doing formulas, creating graphs, different tables. So just doing all of that really improved my Excel skills, even though I have worked with it in the past. And then also, lastly, how to work in a business setting. I have never worked in a business setting. I've worked at the YMCA and a tutor, so I've always been with kids, but now being placed in this business setting was completely different. And it was constant chaos because of the plant. There's intercom calls, people moving in and out of the rooms. So just being able to work in that setting and then still maintain a professional look was really important.
Something that I learned was how to communicate concisely. So we were there for 3 hours, and Joe would stop by for maybe a couple minutes each time. And so if we had questions, we had to know what we wanted to ask, and we had to ask it fast. We couldn't ramble on for 5 minutes trying to figure out what we wanted to say. So I got really good at figuring out what I wanted to say. For me, professionalism, I've also never worked in a business setting, and something that was new to me was like kind of the ranking order. So Joe was in charge of us, and we couldn't just go ask anyone questions because they might be Joe's boss or somebody else's boss, and it might reflect poorly on him. So we could only really ask our questions to Joe, and that was just kind of a new thing for me. And finally, problem-solving skills. The database that we were using was humongous, and it had a bunch of like little tiny things to manipulate it. So like if you wanted to find a different category, there was like certain buttons you had to press, and it was kind of simple stuff, but not really that intuitive. And so my first instinct was to go ask Joe, because he was in charge of us, but he wasn't there a lot of the time. So we just had to figure that out for ourselves.
So when we looked at how this improved us as a teacher, we kind of brainstormed the same ideas, so we decided to like combine them together. First is multiple representations. This is really important in the classroom. As you saw in our presentation, we had a data table with numbers and then a graph representing it visually. This is really important for students because they don't all learn the same. Some are going to understand the numbers, and then some aren't going to be able to understand it until they see that picture. So just making sure that you're incorporating different aspects of representations in your teaching. And then secondly, problem solving. As a teacher, you're not always going to be given the answer. You have to figure stuff out for yourself, just like Rachel and I had to in this project. You're going to have to figure something out in the middle of your lesson even, so you have to get really good at doing it quickly and trying to think on your toes. And then also go with the flow. We were kind of just thrown into this project. He said, look at the data and try to find trends. He didn't really give us a whole bunch of information. He just says, I want to see any trends that you can find. So we kind of just went for it. We decided how we wanted to organize our data and like what mathematical way we were going to manipulate it. And that's exactly what you do in the classroom. You don't know what your class is going to bring in, especially in a high school or middle school with different classes every period. And you don't know what questions you're going to ask. Some classes might be really good at one topic while others aren't. So you just kind of have to go with the flow of your class and make sure that you're teaching them to the best of your ability so they understand everything that you're teaching. And finally, communication. Communication is really important because when Joe, like Rachel said earlier, when Joe was doing explaining SAP to us, we didn't really understand it at first. So we had to ask him to break it down a little more and kind of use different vocabulary and make sure that we understood. But as teachers, we need to make sure that we're not explaining stuff really complex for our students. Like if we're in an Algebra 1 class and we're explaining slope, we can't just bring in derivatives because that's what slope is, because they're not going to know what a derivative is. So just making sure that you're talking to your students in the language that they're going to understand. Any questions or comments?